Hong Kong is a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China, formed by Hong Kong Island, the southern part of the Kowloon Peninsula, and the New Territories, which include the North Mainland area. It is one of the world's major trade and financial centers. It's played an important role in the modernization of China. The Roman Catholic Church in Hong Kong was established as a mission prefecture in 1841, became a vicariate apostolic in 1874, and a diocese in 1946. All Catholics in Hong Kong number about 600,000, including foreign workers. The Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception was built in 1910. In the morning of Holy Thursday, the Chrism Mass is celebrated by Cardinal John Tong Hon and Cardinal Joseph Zhen Kyun, with the participation of more than 200 priests.
The Pontifical Institute for Foreign Missions, or PIME, has been present in Hong Kong since 1858. Practically, we built this diocese. The bishops were of PIME, the Procura and the Chancellery were held by PIME. Then, in the late 1960s, that is, in 1967, we gradually handed over the diocese. The last bishop of PIME was Monsieur Bianchi, so we continued to be present and supportive. There are still about 20 fathers, but slowly we are retiring, because it is right that the local church should carry on evangelization. We are clearly always present in many aspects, especially in pastoral care, in services to the handicapped, in social issues.
Our order SVD Development Missionary came to Hong Kong as the first mission territory for SVD. So in 1878, Joseph Fernandez and Anzet, two of them, as the first missionary, came to Hong Kong. And then later on, they went to Shandong. That is the hometown of Confucianism. So that is not the king emperor, but that is the first, the most important person to influence Chinese culturally, morally, and also just the ordinary life is influenced by Confucianism. We have lots of missionaries and in mainland China, because we were the earliest missionary go back to China in the 1980s. That is why many of us were joined, and then many of us were sending to the whole world, different countries to study. And then now we come back. Some come back to Hong Kong, and then some people go to other countries to serve the migrant. But of course, most of us go back to mainland China already to do the mission. I come from mainland China, so also China is the biggest population in the whole world. It will be important for the whole Catholic Church.
The history of the Christian presence in China passes through different periods. The first period is that of the Eastern Syriac Church, called, inappropriately, Nestorian. The first delegation is dated back to the year 635, led by a bishop or a priest. The second is the Franciscan period. The papacy sent delegations in order to enter into a relationship with the Mongol emperors and be able to converse with them. The third period is that of the Jesuits. Father Matteo Ricci, with Father Ruggeri, began a stable presence in China in 1583 and has continued to this day. During the Jesuit period, there was the famous controversy of the rites, about the way to call the name of God in Chinese and about the rites of ancestors. Thus, the emperor decided to ban the Christian faith from China. Later, other emperors persecuted the Christian church, especially in the 18th century.
The history of the Dominicans in Asia, it is over 500 years. In the 1850, the Dominicans established in Hong Kong. We come here to share our faith. Basically, Hong Kong is not a Catholic place, although there are very good, committed Christians and Catholics. I have been working here in Hong Kong, mainly in this school, and only 7% of the students are Catholics. So they give us a lot of opportunities to spread the good news to many students, young people, families, and so on and so forth. Many of those students, even after graduation in the universities around the world, they come and they are baptized. So it is really an encouragement for any missionary to continue working in this part of the world. And I think as a foreigner, as a European, we have been always very welcome in Hong Kong.
The Second World War began, and missionary work slowed down. But then a civil war between the Nationalist Army and the Communist Army started, leading to the victory of the Communists in October 1949. Then the Communist authorities began to send away foreigners, and Chinese clergy and faithful were enslaved with persecutions and in different ways, including the creation of the Patriotic Association, linked with the Church, but under the control of the Communist Party, so as to control the Church from within.
The division between the official church and the underground church started in 1957, when Mao Zedong said it was necessary to nationalize the Catholic Church. To do so, he demanded that bishops and priests entered the Patriotic Association that had to build an independent church and obliged them to this subscription. At the time, 1957 to 1958, many bishops and many priests did not accept this, and according to them, China had to give religious freedom, and so everybody had to be free to relate to the Pope and other world bishops. So a fracture was created between bishops and priests that accepted this project of Mao Zedong in the name of patriotism, in the name of support for China, while there were bishops that immediately spent 10 to 15 or 20 years in prison because they did not accept it. In history, these priests and bishops that supported the Patriotic Association are called the Patriotic Church, while the bishops and priests that did not accept Mao Zedong's conditions were the faithful or underground church, precisely because it was not official.
After the revolution, we have Chinese Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 1976, these 10 years. China is really under the suffering. Even the government, all the people are under the suffering. Even we cannot imagine what kind of suffering they had. Of course, at that time I was not born, but I learned from the books or from my forefathers. That's the truth. And then all the religions are not so welcomed in China, even our Catholics. So that's why there was some kind of persecution in China, even after the revolution in the 80s or the beginning of the 90s. Even the China is opened, but still have some difficulties, little by little, to contact with the whole church, especially in Catholic. You know, China is sometimes disconnect with the Holy See or with the Vatican. Sometimes we can say the Chinese church, Catholic church, is left behind. Everybody tried to do this effort to become one church in China.
With the launch of Deng Xiaoping's reform, economic liberalization, opening of China to the world, the situation in China has greatly improved. In the 1980s, there was strong development of religions, of all religions, Buddhism, Taoism, Christian churches, and the cosmic, i.e. popular religion. But there are ups and downs. Chinese authorities went from periods of relaxation to periods of restrictions. The latest period we are living now is a period of restriction, of heavy restriction. Since Xi Jinping came to power, he has begun a very hard policy of restrictions under the title of Chinesization. That is, all religions must become Chinese, especially those from outside. Thus, the Christian churches, Islam, and the Lamaist Buddhism of Tibet. It is a policy to force churches and religions to Chinesize. But the Chinese authorities' main purpose is political. The party must have control over any area of citizens' lives, including the religious aspect. Although they say that they respect religion, but in fact tolerate it and promote Marxism fully.
There are 12 million Catholics in China. The majority are the believers in the Catholic Church loyal to the Holy See, usually called underground, clandestine or non-official. On the 22nd of September 2018 in Beijing, the Holy See and the People's Republic of China signed a provisional agreement whose text has been kept secret. Previously, on the 8th of September 2018, the Holy See recognized 7 Chinese bishops consecrated without a papal mandate from the official or patriotic church ruled by the government.
I cristiani di oggi sono di molte diverse specie. Dunque ci sono.
Today, Christians in China are of different kinds. There are old and young Christians of the traditional current of the faith, and these are suffering enormously, especially after the latest events, the Vatican and China agreement, which left them in bewilderment.
Li lascia disorientati. Dicono, ma cosa capita? Che abbiamo sbagliato tutti questi anni?
They say, what's happening? Were we wrong all those years to remain faithful to our religion? It looks like we were wrong, seeing that those who had always acted against the Church are now triumphing.
Il cardinale Filoni ci dice di non parlare di vittoria o di sconfitta.
Cardinal Filoni tells us not to speak of victory or of defeat, but we recognize we have suffered a complete defeat. And this stirs up surprise. How come these things we could never imagine? I am thinking of the 7 dioceses, to the faithful who now have to obey these 7 excommunicated bishops. That is a tragedy to me. Then there are the opportunist faithfuls who follow these bishops and believe now they can be Catholics and do what they like and have all the advantages. They say, well, now the government helps us. Therefore, all the worse for those who cling stubbornly to living in clandestinity. And this is really sad.
L'accordo tra Cina e Santa Sede, che è stato firmato il 22 settembre del 2018.
The agreement between China and the Holy See that was signed on the 22nd of September 2018 presents a radically new aspect because the Chinese government accepted the nomination of bishops occurring with the approval of the Pope. This is a very original thing, as before, the independence of the Chinese Church meant that the Pope was not involved in the nomination of bishops. This is an important development. But the problem is that since the agreement there has been no nomination of bishops, while there has been a great campaign to affirm more and more the independence of the Chinese Church from all, from the Universal Church, from the Vatican, from the Holy See.
Dalla Santa Sede e così via. Quindi sembra che in qualche modo questo accordo.
So it seems that this agreement has degenerated into a standby situation. Probably this agreement serves for a precise government motive, that is to eliminate the so-called non-official church, that is the underground Catholics, who don't recognize themselves in the Patriotic Association.
Dunque, la cosa più, scandalosa.
The most scandalous thing is not only the provisional agreement, between the Holy See and the Chinese government, which is secret, and no one knows why, but the fact that 7 bishops of the Church ruled by the Chinese government were excommunicated by the Holy See, which then legitimated them. They were excommunicated not only because they were ordained without authorization from Rome, but for many other reasons, why they were absolutely not worth becoming bishops. Now, all the 7 bishops are legitimate, and we know what kind of people they are. It is not a sudden thing. It is the conclusion of over 10 years of wrong Vatican politics. That dates back, I would say, to 2000.
Io conterei proprio dopo il 2000.
Regrettably, in those years, Pope John Paul was old and sick. Then, as soon as Pope Benedict was elected pontiff, he did 2 wonderful things he did not do for other churches. The first is that he wrote a letter to the Chinese Catholics. The second is that he made up a pontifical commission for China, a very powerful commission discussing all the problems. But when push comes to shove, power is in the hands of those who believe in Ostpolitik, and they did not want to do what the Pope wanted, what the Commission wanted, but what they wanted. I said, you follow the wrong politics, that of Ostpolitik, that of compromise. Practically, it is unconditioned surrender to a power that is an atheistic regime. Then you do not respect us. We are from the frontier, the locals, you do not listen to us. But it did not help. Here we are. And for this reason, as both parts of the Church followed these politics over the years, they weakened. Our clandestine church weakened. It was not supported. And it happens that when an old bishop dies, they do not appoint a successor. Then, especially, the church backed by the Chinese government fell lower and lower. Why? Because some opportunists infiltrated, as the Holy See favored them over courageous people defending the faith. That's why it was all very wrong. Now, Pope Francis may not understand the complete situation because he comes from another world. He comes from South America. But, regrettably, the Secretary of State, Parolin, knows very well. He has seen the bad face of Chinese communism. That's why his conciliatory attitude to such an evil government is inexplicable. Therefore, this situation is really unbelievable, as there is no basis for the least optimism.
Cardinal Joseph Zen-Kyun is a Salesian. Already in 1874, Don Giovanni Bosco expressed his desire to send Salesian missionaries to Hong Kong. The first 4 Salesians arrived in China in 1921 and in Hong Kong in 1927. At the St. Anthony parish, Father Pedro Lung is the parish priest and celebrates the Mass of the Lord's Supper. At St. Teresa Church, the Via Crucis is celebrated on Holy Friday. At the Chapel of Our Lady of the Rosary, the Dominican Fathers and novitiates celebrate the Holy Friday rites. At St. Teresa Church, it is celebrated the Easter Vigil Mass. During the 2019 Palm Sunday Mass, Father Peter Zhang Guanzhong, an underground priest of Zhanghua Diocese, was arrested for serving the faithful. His name is part of a long list of underground clergy who are in prison or who've just disappeared. Bishop Peter Xiao Jumin of Zhejiang Province was arrested 5 times since 2016 when appointed bishop. Bishop Cosma Shi Enjiang has already spent 51 years behind bars. He was arrested on Good Friday, the 13th of April 2001. Police arrested Bishop Guo in March 2019. He was afterwards released, but banned from celebrating any Mass as a bishop. The bishops and the priests imprisoned for their faith should obtain the freedom and rights they deserve.
È molto difficile avere notizie e notizie aggiornate su questi casi di persecuzione, così. Però noi sappiamo che c'è un vescovo.
It is very difficult to have updated news on cases of persecution, but we know there is a bishop of Hebei, of Baodong, Giacomo Zhu Jimin, who has disappeared since 1996 in the hands of the police, and the Chinese government says it knows nothing about this. We don't know anything. But he was taken by the police, and surely he will be in a forced labor camp or in an area where he has been obliged to change identity or something similar.
Resta il fatto che c'è una diocesi che è senza il suo vescovo.
Is the fact that there is a diocese without its bishop. Then there are some underground priests who were killed during these years. The government, or rather the police, says this priest, for example, Wei He-ping, about 44 years old, died in a suicide, but nobody believes it. He was killed. He was very alive, a very good person. He organized Chinese youth events. From all China they came to him to participate during these events. So it's impossible that it was a suicide. Then there are some other priests in prison or in a forced labor camp. And there are also some official bishops who suffer because of the control of the government. Among them, I wish to recall the Bishop of Shanghai, Tadeo Madachin, who from 2012, that is, since he said he didn't want to take part in the Patriotic Association, was taken and put under house arrest. He cannot undertake any ministry, neither wear the pectoral bishop cross. Nothing. He is considered as a priest. He is under house arrest at the Shanghai Seminary and is at Sheshan, next to the National Shrine of Our Lady.
The agreement between the Vatican and China is secret, but it is said to regard only the choice of bishops. But now, the people of the government go and oblige the faithful to sign and give their names to enroll in the Patriotic Church, as they maintain that the Pope has already agreed. But from what Cardinal Filoni says in one article of his, the Pope has not yet given his consent. And then they are using this agreement to cheat the people. It is really persecution. They go personally. And if a priest does not give his name to the Patriotic Association, he loses his church. He has no more right to celebrate Mass, not even privately in his house. His faithful must disperse. So it is a new wave of persecution.
Adesso, ecco, io lo dico in una maniera cruda, e con l'aiuto della Santa Sede adesso riescono a distruggere tutta la Chiesa.
Now I'll put it a crude way. With the help of the Holy See at this point, they succeed in destroying all the church. Furthermore, there might be some new faithful who do not know much of the doctrine of the church. They go to church because they feel some interior emptiness and see that in a church they can pray, they can sing, they can hear the word of the Holy Scriptures, and they are happy. But the church becomes like a Protestant church,
Che fa tanto bene, ma non è Chiesa cattolica.
which may be fine, but it is not a Catholic church. In passing now, there is fierce persecution of the Protestants too.
E che loro hanno tolto la croce e sono chiese protestanti,
Many churches from where crosses were removed are Protestant churches. So we've reached aggravation of the persecution for everyone,
Persecuzione, per tutti, per tutte le religioni, no?
for all religions, even for Tibet, for Xinjiang, for the Protestants and for the Catholics.
Most of us are converted Catholic. We are not born Catholics. Few are born Catholics. I'm converted when I was 22 years old. My mother also converted, my father, my brothers and sisters. We have priests. We have one bishop, a very old bishop. He is a Dominican also. Now he died 2 or 3 years ago. He died. But I met the bishop also. At that time, he is the only priest in our province. Goes to every village, or more, if there is a Catholic, he will go to preach. We invited some other priests from another province to help this bishop for the sacramental things. Also under the control by the government, he cannot freely to express himself. Unofficial bishop, he was not recognized by the government, but recognized by the Holy See. Officially, in my province, only one diocese, but in the Holy See, we are registered 5 dioceses in my province. So this bishop is only one bishop, the whole province. But in official, they have one bishop also. So they have 2 bishops. So the Catholic goes to their different bishops. That's the situation. The Catholic Church in Hong Kong is very alive and powerful. In Hong Kong, there are 270 Catholic schools, and 100,000 people are studying Catholic school. So for them, Catholicism is also a norma they received. But in China, mainland China, it's different. We don't have this kind of education. We receive that we are godless. The first education that later you want to change is very difficult to change that we have a God.
Here we have the novitiate and the studentate, where the students, Chinese students, they go to the seminary to study philosophy and theology. The mission in Hong Kong, it was established in the 19th, actually, when we started to have a convent here in the same place. And it was a convent to educate the young boys supposed to go to missions in Philippines, in Vietnam, in Southeast Asia.
A nome della cinesizzazione vogliono che il partito.
On behalf of Chinesization, they want the party to control everything in China. Recently, there have been very strict rules reported by the newspapers, which everyone knows. For example, children cannot attend religious ceremonies. You cannot receive religious education before the age of 18, that is, when you are of age. Meanwhile, in schools, and of course on the media, they make communist propaganda about Marxism and atheism, although they say that they respect religion, but in fact tolerate it and promote Marxism fully. So any religious education is forbidden. In Hong Kong, there is still freedom as before, but there are restrictions in education. There are also some restrictions in the administration management. From the point of view of pastoral ministry, so far things are as quiet as before.
In Hong Kong, there are 51 parishes comprising 40 churches. The diocese has 296 priests, 68 brothers, and 474 sisters. Reverend Father Gabriel Altamirano Ortega is the parish priest of St. Teresa Church.
In Cina c'è, diciamo, una libertà di culto che permette di andare a messa.
In China, there is freedom of religion, a freedom that permits going to Mass, but staff are controlled in their activities, controlled in their meetings, controlled in their themes, and even controlled in their homilies.
Quindi, diciamo così, è una libertà di culto proprio ridotta all'osso.
So the freedom of religion is stripped to the bone. If the churches do not have the updated documents now requested, destroy the churches.
Se le chiese non hanno i sacerdoti che seguono le regole secondo cui...
If the churches do not have the priests who follow the rules according to which they are not allowed to give religious instruction to minors of 18, the priests are banned from the parishes, etc. Then there were some dimensions which require making Catholic theology, the religion, the religious symbols more Chinese. So they started destruction of crosses, of churches, of cupolas, of paintings that were too Western for the Ministry of Religious Affairs.
E si depaupera praticamente tutta la tradizione.
And all the Christian tradition that has been in China for at least 5 centuries is impoverished. Father Altamirano celebrates the Easter Vigil Mass.
Today we stimulate the diocese to the missionary spirit, to evangelization. The diocese is very active and especially engaged in working with the catechumens, mostly adults. Every year there are at least 3,000 baptisms of adults, precisely because this missionary spirit has increased. Even the lay people are very active. And I think this is also a credit to our Pime fathers, who have worked really well in this diocese. And through the lay people of Hong Kong, we can also act as a bridge to carry the Christian message to China and support and help the faithful.
Father Altamirano is going to baptize more than 100 new faithful.
Tutte le religioni in Cina sono controllate allo stesso modo. Oltretutto adesso
All religions in China are controlled in the same way, especially now as in China there is a great religious rebirth of all religions, but especially of Protestants and Catholics.
soprattutto interessante di protestanti e cattolici.
The government is very scared of this religious growth, so it tries to control all religions and tries to suffocate this religious rebirth.
Soffocare tutta questa rinascita religiosa. Per esempio,
For example, there is a big debate in China over eliminating mosque domes because they are not Chinese. Arabic writing must be removed. In Tibet, it's the same. Images of the Dalai Lama must be removed. They cannot speak or pray about him. In Tibet, there is an attempt to cancel the Tibetan culture, the Tibetan language.
In Hong Kong, in 2014, there were peaceful protests known as Yellow Umbrellas. What they were asking for was more autonomy, and especially that the governor of Hong Kong be elected by locals, not imposed by China.
le proteste che sono scoppiate ad Hong Kong.
The protests that have burst out in Hong Kong since June 2019 were in particular due to the Hong Kong government's attempt to pass an extradition bill that allows the extradition of criminal suspects also in countries with which there is no agreement on how extradition has to happen. Among these countries is also China. The problem is that all fear the Chinese judiciary system, which is absolutely at the service of the Communist Party. All fear fake Chinese accusations. For example, the possibility to accuse dissidents who are in Hong Kong of the possibility of accusing a priest who might be helping the underground church, or human rights activists who can be accused of being criminals, as has happened in the past. But also entrepreneurs who might work in China could be eliminated so to rule out the competition, accusing them of some crime.
Per questo, questa legge.
For these reasons, the extradition bill united 2 million Hong Kong citizens to rally against the Hong Kong government and against China in defense of freedom. All these rallies ask first that the bill is eliminated, erased.
Seconda cosa, siccome nelle manifestazioni.
The second thing is that during the rallies there were some clashes between the police and protesters, very violent clashes when police used extreme violence with tear gas, rubber bullets, sticks, etc. So the people are asking for an independent inquiry on police violence.
Questo l'hanno chiesto anche diversi paesi.
Also, some foreign countries asked for the same, saying there is a violation of human rights in Hong Kong. We have to say that the Hong Kong population, at least the majority of the population, keeps fighting, continues to rally, also for the principle on which Hong Kong is based, that is, one country, two systems. That is a unique country, China, in which Hong Kong has its own system, a liberal system, or Hong Kong becomes another Chinese city with little freedom and few human rights.
E con pochi diritti umani.
The Chinese government seems to have opened up to the world. Economically, it is becoming strong, but obviously it does not feel safe.
Perciò anche questo tentativo di Xi Jinping.
So even this attempt by Xi Jinping to ensure perpetual power can be explained by his fear of being unable to control everything.
Ora, io penso che tutti questi atti di forza.
Now, I think all these acts of force show the very weakness. They need all these measures to defend themselves.
Per difendersi, ecco. Lei
Imagine that internal security expenses exceed military expenses. So they really fear whoever speaks against them. It is clear that all these lawyers who come and defend some ideas are put in jail. They are made to confess on video and directly on TV, and they control all the media. There is an online police army in control. All this shows they are afraid.
Nonostante questo, ci sono ancora delle voci coraggiose,
There are some courageous voices, though. Of course, they are immediately reduced to silence. And then, thankfully, at least some have reached safety abroad.
Ovviamente, senza nessun loro vantaggio immediato.
Obviously, without any immediate advantage, they unite and speak out. That's why those who can speak freely should speak. Not only because of a certain sense of justice, but precisely because we have a hope. The hope that the truth will make its way ahead.
Hong Kong è stato sempre un ponte, anzi Giovanni Paolo II diceva che la Chiesa di Hong Kong, la Chiesa di Singapore, la Chiesa...
Hong Kong was always a bridge. John Paul II said that the Hong Kong Church, the Singapore Church and the Taiwanese Church had to be church bridges with the Church in China to support, to make the richness of the universal Church be lived. Let's say that if the Hong Kong population continues to rally, it will be much more difficult to operate as a church bridge.
There have been Christians here for 100 to 150 years. So there is a tradition. But the big change was in the 50s. When people left the slums in China and came here, the church helped them a lot. They found in the church a support, a message, and many became Christians.
There was a time in the past that the missionaries and faith came from Western countries. But now, probably the missionaries are going to go from here, and it is happening already. So at present time there are Dominicans in Spain who are from Chinese or Vietnam or whatever, try to learn the language and help to develop the faith there.
Our St. Joseph Church was one of the 3 earliest church in Hong Kong. Now we have mainly do the work in Hong Kong for SVD is migrant for the Filipinos, and then the migrant for the Indonesians, and the migrant for the Mandarin speakings from mainland China in Hong Kong. Actually, I'm doing this part now. So found some Mandarin communities, and then to make a home for the people who came to Hong Kong as the newcomers. 30 years ago, the missionary already went to mainland China in the 1980s. The church just opened, country also just opened for the whole world. So we already tried. So that time is more difficult. We try our best, and actually this generation SVDs from mainland China is the product of the first trying already. So now we try our best continually to do the mission. I go China every year, but only visit my parents. But actually, for me, it's quite difficult to go back to China to be a priest because I ordained in Australia. That is not acceptable from the government. That's why I'm in Hong Kong, no problem. But if I go back to China, I never do any church activities, so that you can just make easy, so that I go in and get out, no problem. But once openly in the church, so that is quite complicated.
Speak about Chinese is not easy to explain because in China is so big. From south to north, different place, the people character is different. And the way to show our faith is also different. But I think the common way to show our faith is by prayer. Chinese people is also a religious people. They like to pray, even though under some difficulties or limitations, they still express their faith and practice their faith within the limited situation. And also the Chinese character people, for my understanding, is a peaceful people. They harmonious living together, very sociable people, and also very kind people. The Chinese people also, under this situation, some of them are very pious Catholic.
Molto paziente, che ha dovuto soffrire molto.
It is a very patient people who had to suffer a lot for different reasons, not only religiously, but economically and so on. This people is very sensitive to the Lord who suffers. For the celebration of Holy Friday, the churches are very crowded, much more than Holy Thursday, because the suffering of Christ unites them, because it is a people that has suffered. Now in Hong Kong they are doing much better. But in the first years I came here, people were suffering a lot. In order to survive, they had to work 14 to 15 hours a day. They lived in slums. Today the situation is much improved. However, in the families they keep the memory of suffering, whereby adult and elderly people perceive its value, especially by looking at the suffering of Christ on the cross.
People who have never believed, they find it attractive, the values of Christianity. So there are values, the values of Christ, that they appreciate. And even you can feel it here in the school, Parents bringing their children to Catholic schools, and really because they respect the values that we teach them, not because of other reasons. So they don't have any prejudice against the faith at all. And to the fathers and so on and so forth, they respect us, they love us, really.
Senz'altro diciamo, l'accordo sino-vaticano mette in crisi la Chiesa sotterranea.
Clearly, the Vatican Agreement puts the underground church, the unofficial church, into a crisis, because many prefer to no longer be priests so as not to subject themselves to the conception of an independent church. But they are in any case human persons and God's people, and in their houses or places they go, at their own risk, maybe they will be able to exercise their mission.
Oggi come oggi, un segreto completo, una chiusura completa non è più possibile.
Today, a complete secrecy, a total closure, today is no longer possible. And then we know what happens after the agreement. We know what happens in China, because despite all their measures, we know what happens in China because the facts are still known. So let's hope that the sense of faith still exists in the vast majority of the Church. So let's hope that this information is disseminated, as do some organizations like Asia News, which is very rich in information. I hope people will find out that this is wrong. That's wrong. It's helping bad people do their bad things, and you don't earn anything. You don't earn anything. I hope they learn something from history, because they always boast of centuries of experience, diplomacy, but they forget what happened with Napoleon. What did the Church achieve by signing an agreement with Napoleon? Nothing. And what did it get by signing a deal with Hitler? Nothing. And even today, unfortunately, still today, they are suffering the damage that Marxism has caused to the Church, with what happened in Russia.
In Russia, dunque tutte queste cose sono dimenticate? Strano,
So, are all these things forgotten? Strange. It's really strange to understand how diplomats forget the history of diplomacy.
Le forze religiose hanno la possibilità di dare alla Cina una dimensione molto più rispettosa dell'uomo.
Certainly, religious forces have the possibility to give China a dimension that is much more respectful of man, much more respectful of persons, that the Chinese government does not have. In the Chinese world, in the Chinese structure, in the Chinese system or work, man is a number. Actually, there are a lot of suicides, especially among the youth, because they are tired of working as machines 14 to 15 hours a day, living in the same place that they work, eating in the same place that they work in. Practically, it's a kind of labor camp, but called a firm.
Ma detto fabbrica. Mao Zedong, quando ha preso il potere, ha decretato la fine delle religioni in Cina.
Bearing in mind that when Mao Zedong took power, he decreed the end of religions in China while religions were growing, that Christianity, Catholicism and the Vatican had to end, while now China has accepted an agreement. However weak, it means that the Chinese cannot do without religion.
Significa che i cinesi non possono fare a meno della religione. E quindi, a mio parere, diciamo, il lavoro che sta facendo il governo.
And so the work that the Chinese government is doing against religions and against Christianity and Catholicism is bound to fail.
Pope Benedict XVI, in his prayer which he composed dedicated to Our Lady of Jisan, he recalled how Our Lady was full of faith as she waited for the dawn of Easter Day.
Noi credenti in un Signore risorto.
We are believers in a resurrected Lord, and therefore it is not that we despair.
Veramente sentiamo grande compassione per quelli che stanno soffrendo.
We who live in freedom feel great compassion for those who are suffering, but we have the word of God to encourage them, not our words. Therefore our church is always the church of martyrs, but the church of the resurrected.